Good morning, everybody. I'm David Wright, and this morning we're going to continue in 1 Samuel, and today specifically looking at the 18th chapter. This is a continuation of the story that involves King Saul, who's king of Israel, and David, his servant. David had been a shepherd and a musician, and he had been a great warrior on behalf of Saul in the recent times in this story. And then we also have Jonathan, who was King Saul's son. So David, as I said, was a great warrior and in fact had slain Goliath, the giant, the Philistine giant that nobody else would do battle with. And David put his trust in the Lord and went right out and killed Goliath. So David's star and his fame were greatly on the rise. As a matter of fact, people in the streets were proclaiming that King Saul hath killed thousands of our enemies, but David hath killed tens of thousands of our enemies. So David was really on the ascendancy, and he was having all sorts of success, and he was much admired. King Saul wasn't enjoying that as much as you would think he would. He was a little worried about David. He was a lot worried about David. And as a matter of fact, he was so vile and worried about David that he tried to kill him. And when he couldn't do that, he kept trying to devise ways that he could have David killed. He was really worried about David. He felt David was a threat, and he was, yes, jealous of all of David's many successes on the battlefield and otherwise. He saw him as a distinct threat. It's strange that Saul would think that of such a devoted servant, because David was truly devoted to Saul, but Saul not so much to David. He wanted to get rid of him, get that threat out of the way. Jonathan's son, Saul's son, Jonathan, he and David were absolutely best of friends. Jonathan loved David with all his heart and all his soul. He wanted to help him. He relished, and he really was proud of David for all of his successes. And the more successful David became, the more David loved him. You would think that wouldn't be the case, but because Jonathan stood to inherit Saul's throne, and he had to see David as a threat to that. But instead, when David was successful, Jonathan just loved him even more. Saul, as I said, was afraid of David, and he was intimidated, and yes, he was jealous, very jealous of this young man and all the things that he had been doing. He resented David's success for sure. So that's the scenario, and what do we get from that? Where do we take that? Well, first, think about Jonathan. In love, we're united. In love, we help each other. In love, we don't worry about what our friend may have accomplished that's better than me or more than me. Love brings us together, and it helps us not only accept and love our friends' successes, it helps us to be more aware of our successes also. So, but if you flip that and you look at Saul, who was approaching this thing as David as a threat, he was jealous. He wanted to do away with him. How does that kind of translate into our daily lives today? Well, think about it. Haven't we all maybe at one time or another been jealous of a friend's success? Maybe they just drive a better car than we do. Maybe their house is prettier. Maybe their kids are more successful. Maybe they are more accomplished in all of these things that they do. And we have a tendency to be jealous of that instead of being very happy about it. And that jealousy won't allow us to take pleasure in our friends' successes. Instead, we're just too busy counting up all the friends' successes and not being cognizant of our blessings and our successes and how well we are doing. So what do we take from all of that? Jealousy is bad and love is good. So what should we do? What we should do is to try to replace that jealousy with the kind of love that Jonathan had for David. It would be much better if we just worked on asking God to help us love our friends and not be so worried about the things that we're jealous about. Replace jealousy with love. That ought to be our prayer. We ought to be working really, really hard to work on getting to a position where we just love our friends regardless, and that all of that brings us closer together. Jealousy drives us apart. So that's what we ought to be trying to do. Ask God to help us do that. I'll see you in church Sunday. Thanks.